Did the Alabama Supreme Court get it right in ruling that microscopic IVF embryos are part of the human family?
Well, they did biologically and in their terms legally, because there was nothing in their Wrongful Death of Minors Act that excluded the very youngest of the unborn children, who were already included in their protections. So it made sense legally. It's fascinating culturally and ethically. I think that it's a great opportunity for people to think again about the whole meaning of human life in its very earliest stages. Because biologically, of course, a human embryo is part of the human family. Anyone who loves their offspring knows that in their heart. But biologically, we begin on day one and we continue through to natural death as the same being, the same human existence, even though we continually change our appearance, our capacities. But I find what's most helpful, Lyle, is to think of what really happens on that first day of conception of a new being. Essentially, a new name is spoken, a name that's never existed before. It's a genetic name, a genetic identity, which takes a whole lifetime to be spoken, a whole lifetime to be expressed. And it's that identity which is our name. It is what and who we are. It's what makes us part of the human family. And we should treasure that. We shouldn't reach over and delete this character from our story by dropping it on the laboratory floor like happened in Alabama.
Yeah, well, this is, of course, what happens in Australia. And I guess this ruling last week has brought this issue back into focus again, because many couples are striving to conceive and have a family. And I think you and I, share that desire and would want that for our friends who are childless. And you as a GP, I know, deal with patients like this all the time. Is there an ethical way to go about IVF that doesn't create excess embryos? Because in America alone, and I guess this is what's driven the Alabama decision, there are some millions of unused human embryos, which, as you say, are a new life in Australia. There would be who knows how many. How do we deal with the issue of IVF in knowing what we know about the ethics?
True. This is the heart of it. For those people who are proceeding with IVF, they must assert their own values in this field. They do not have to allow the laboratories to create multiple embryos. They don't have to. Of course, the laboratories will want to, because they want to get the best percentage outcome for their clients. They want a higher percentage of take-home babies. And if you make a whole lot of embryos and you pick and choose, male, female, quality, whatever looks best, you're giving the clients the best chance. Okay, but to do that is to imply that the embryo is material that we can sift like material and dispose of like material. And that's a very big ethical call. Whereas parents who are going down this path can insist that no, any offspring that we conceive through this method of IVF must be given the same chance of life as any other offspring, must be treated with the same unconditional love and acceptance and welcome as any other offspring. So, dear professor, dear doctor, thank you for your assistance. But when you help us to conceive and you conceive an embryo, it is to be put straight into the mother's womb, no questions asked.
So what does that look like practically, David?
Parents can do that, but it's very hard.
It's okay. So it's obviously a lot harder because to make the process easy, because it's quite an invasive and often traumatic and difficult process for women. That's why they seem to create multiple excess embryos. This is why we have such a large stock of leftover embryos. You'd be advocating a process where you wouldn't create excess embryos, where every embryo would be implanted and given the chance of life. Does that then make the process more difficult for the family and the mother trying to conceive?
No doubt. The percentage of effectiveness would drop, but you've got to weigh that against the keeping of that circle of love, keeping of the circle of unconditional welcome and acceptance for any little life that's conceived. That's the consideration. And remember, when IVF first came into existence, I think the first IVF baby, Louise Brown, what was that, 1984, I think. But anyway, in the 80s, all the states in Australia held inquiries into the implications of this new technique. And one of the dominant findings and recommendations was this: whatever you do, do not allow freezing of embryos. Don't do it. You're buying an ethical nightmare. And they just went and did it anyway.